Congratulations, you've been chosen to teach summer school.
Be quiet and pay attention.
We can't learn our ways.
Oh, I'm not a real teacher.
I have had it with this school, Skinner.
That's all right. These aren't real students, though.
Hello and welcome back to the Dune Minute podcast. Class is officially back in session. Computers away. We're talking about the Butlerian Jihad today. My name is Zach.
And I am John.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. It has been a minute since we've been recording.
I think almost a month.
Something like that, yeah. We got a little delayed with sicknesses and stuff with our recording schedule, but
Tis the
back.
season.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. But we are back on it. I've got a cat right next to me. I've got some notes. Let's do it.
And we got this is a beefy one. Like I said, we're talking the Butlerian Jihad today. And if you're following along in the encyclopedia, either the printed version or the PDF, we're covering a couple of pages in this one. So we're covering pages 137 through 143 in the encyclopedia. So we got a couple of pages, a lot of dense information to get through.
Yep. So before we get too started, want to kind of lay some ground rules for this episode of Summer School. We talked a lot about Brian Herbert's version of the Butlerian Jihad and everything during our coverage of Dune Prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost entirely focused on the Dune Encyclopedia. Everything we're going to be talking about today is mostly coming from that. We might, dive a little bit into some of the differences with, Brian's version of the Jihad and everything, but most of our discussion today is going to be around everything from the 84 encyclopedia.
Yeah. Which in all honesty is a much more compelling story in my mind.
It really is. Yeah. Anyways, we'll get to that later.
So where should we start this, man? This is one of the pivotal.
I was just going to say there's so many places we can start.
Yeah. This is one of the, if not the pivotal moments in the Dune universe is the Butlerian Jihad. So I feel like it would only be smart to start talking about Butler, the person whose name is attached to it. And I've purposely not said her first name because I'm still a little shaky on the pronunciation. It's like one of those words you read and you have a way that you say it in your head. But
how do you say it in your head?
I read it quickly. So this is Jehanne to me, but I know that's not right.
It's not Jehanne.
I know it's not right. I read it quickly. Is it Jehanne?
So
Jehanne?
I have looked up how to pronounce it. Apparently it's French. Mm-hmm. So it's Jehanne,
okay.
Which is supposed to be like the French version of Joan.
Oh, okay.
Apparently.
I thought Joan was the French version of Joan.
I don't fucking no. So I committed a sin and went to a thinking machine and said, how the fuck do I pronounce this? And YouTube spit back out Jehanne. So don't at us if we're wrong on this.
If you want to follow along, count the different ways we pronounce the name throughout this episode.
Are we going to be inconsistent? Probably. Are we professionals? Absolutely not.
Well, Jehanne, is that what you said?
Jehanne.
Jehanne. Butler, hereby just referred to as Butler in my mind.
Okay.
She is the person who started this whole thing. All of this madness that we've experienced in the Dune world, with the lack of thinking machines and Mentats and the Spacing Guild and all this other stuff, can trace its beginnings back to the Butlerian Jihad.
Yeah. So there's a lot to go over here, and I think what we should do is just kind of go over where Jehanne came from. Mm-hmm. She's from the planet Komos, which is essentially a provincial breadbasket for the Richese.
Yeah. Which is a name we're familiar with.
Or the Riches, depending on how you pronounce it. Riches. We have an official pronunciation now.
Yeah.
It is Richese. Like it or not, that
Still
is
not happy about it, but okay, it's fine.
You know, that's what we've been given, and
Yeah.
we can only go off of what we've been given at this point. And it's really only a provincial breadbasket under the threat of force.
Mhm.
And the reason why that is because the entire Richese army is larger than the population of Komos. So they can try to do so, they could have tried to fight for their independence, but it gives very like North American colonies where,
Sure. Sure.
the British or the British military was significantly larger than the entire population as a whole. Jehanne Butler was born in 230 BG, not 2030 BG. Was born in 230 BG on Komos. We're not given any information about her parents.
No.
I don't think it really matters to the story.
Not really. I mean, the story picks up kind of, really later in her life. I mean, she was a priestess for the, goddesses of, or whatever religious organization existed on Komos here. They were priestesses of a deity called Kubebe.
Yep.
Kubebe. And she was also trained as a Bene Gesserit. So that's really the background that we need. So I'm sure there was a lot of school that went through or went into that training. That's what happened later in her life. But the story really picks up after she's married and having her first child.
Yeah. And I know you're probably hearing that she was a Bene Gesserit and you're thinking, wait, what the fuck? Everything I just watched in Prophecy was saying that the Bene Gesserit started after the Butlerian Jihad. That's in Brian's.
Yeah, that's Brian lore.
If you're trying to piece together everything, we talked about this a little bit in our minute episodes, but to kind of catch everyone up, the Bene Gesserit in the Dune Encyclopedia trace their origins all the way back to Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
So
in some form or fashion. Yeah.
Yeah. So for someone in 230 BG to be trained as a Bene Gesserit, according to this canon, it does make sense. It does work. This isn't out of the ordinary or some weirdness. And this is why we're sticking almost exclusively to the encyclopedia for this episode, because otherwise we are getting into a huge mess of various timelines and things not adding up properly.
Yeah. And just as a side note, Brian Herbert has written many books on the Butlerian Jihad and the things that went into it. So he has his own established canon. It's not what we're familiar with. So we're going to stick into the encyclopedia, like John said.
Well, we're kind of familiar with it, but the encyclopedia is our main source.
Yeah. Okay. So Butler, Jehanne. So Jehanne Butler, priestess of Kubebe, Bene Gesserit, married to here's another fun name, THET''R.
I read it as Thatir.
Thatir. I like that. Okay. I can remember that.
I don't know if it's wrong, but
let's go with that.
Theater just doesn't sound as fun.
Theater.
The theater.
Thatir. I like Thatir. That's a good name.
Yeah.
So she marries a Thatir Butler, and I wish there was an entry just on this guy because he sounds cool as hell to me.
Well, to you, but he's just okay. So Thatir Butler, they marry in 205 BG, so she's 25 at the time of marriage. Thatir Butler is the Logistos of Zania, which is one of the administrative districts of Komos.
Yeah.
Now, you and I understand what that means, but people that are listening are probably like, "What the fuck?"
He's a bureaucrat.
Yeah, he's
an efficiency guy.
So a logistos is basically an administrator for that district, reporting on harvests for the district and collecting tribute of said harvest. Basically, think your local tax assessor.
Yeah, pretty much. But the part that I say he's really interesting is because he's a logistics guy. It's in the name, and my line of work is all about efficiencies and logistics.
You do work at a logistics company, yes.
Yeah. And so I'm super interested in this guy's background, but we don't get a lot of his background.
Unfortunately.
We get a little bit of sprinkled here and there, but this is mainly focused on Jehanne.
So let's get back to her.
Yeah. So when we pick up, the story really kicks off in that year that you just mentioned, 205 BG.
Yep.
Jehanne and Thatir are expecting a child. They go to one of the hospitals on Pylos, which is the capital of Komos.
Yep.
And Jehanne goes into labor. They knock her out with some drugs. When she wakes up, and this is really the big important part here, when she wakes up, she finds that her baby was aborted by the hospital director.
She was told that her baby was, quote, too deformed to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously she, being Bene Gesserit, knew her body and the body of the developing baby very well.
Yeah.
Knew that this wasn't exactly true.
Yeah.
Did some sleuthing and, background investigating to find out.
Well, using Thatir's position, they were able to figure out all the backstory for the decision.
Yeah. Using all of this information, use this information to find out that the hospital director is a, quote, self-programming machine. The first self-programming machine on Komos, in fact. And it had been performing unjustified abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're both pissing off and appeasing to the pro-choice and pro-life audiences with this.
Well, I'm not going to cut this actually, because that is a big theme here, is where does this land in that argument? I don't think it's as black and white in this world,
because there's no choice.
Yeah. And
also forced abortions aren't, exactly good.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think we can agree that neither of us are experts on the topic, and we should not.
Nope.
We should not spout our opinions.
But both of us can firmly say that we are very,
very
adamant
pro-choice
in a woman's right to choose about her own body.
Of course. Okay. Now that that's out of the way.
Yep.
Is your ass covered? Mine's covered, I think.
Okay. I'm sitting down.
Anyways. They found that this hospital director, aka the thinking machine that is running the medical program here, was performing these unjustified abortions for about a 2-year period. And there's just a laundry list of evidence that they found. This obviously upsets them very much. And they go back to the priestesses on Komos, and they start this movement to get rid of the hospital director. And in a larger sense, thinking machines on Komos.
Yeah. So around the same time as well, Jehanne and Thatir began forming this organization, which I think this is cool. It's the Front for the End of Common Exploitation.
Yeah.
It is a secular organization, as we just said, though, basically to free Komos from the control of thinking machines.
Yeah. And it caught on, man. It caught on like wildfire.
Fucking TikTok dances.
Oh, rest in peace.
Oh, damn. For the 18 hours that it was down or whatever.
Well, it's gone forever in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is something that there had already been this sentiment of they're being oppressed by the Richese.
Help, I'm being repressed.
Yeah. They all saw the violence inherited in the system.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, keep going.
I think there's something about a watery tart throwing a scimitar somewhere in here. A moist bent, maybe. I don't know.
Moist bent distributing swords as a system of government.
Anyways, they the priestesses back in her order They take this and they run with it. Like I was saying a second ago, there was already this like growing sentiment of, hey, we're being repressed by the Rechese. And when they found out that it was one of the instruments in this oppression was a computer, they were fucking pissed.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Kubebe earlier, but a little bit of background on Kubebe is that Kubebe was a mother goddess, kind of viewed as just like a source of all life, both animal and plant. So when they're seeing machines overtake, essentially Kubebe's domain, they're like, nah, fuck that shit.
From what I've read, Komos was a very matriarchal society.
Entirely.
Yeah. The men in the relationships would handle, logistical things that happened in the family, but the true source of, power and responsibility in the family rested with the women and the raising of the children and all of the things that come with that.
I see the dynamic on Komos very much like the dynamic between Hermes and his wife from Futurama.
Okay.
Where Hermes is just a bureaucrat.
I like it. Yeah. Like so the movement really just took off. The priestesses added a lot of steam behind this, and after they kind of gathered their organization up in arms, really, they went to Rechese and they said, "All right, we're fucking done with this."
Yeah, and they did it very like tactfully too, because the way that they went about doing this was they used the like annual collection of tribute, or maybe not annual, but at the time of collection of all this harvest tribute and everything, to essentially steal these ships, because Komos didn't really have ships to leave the planet. They weren't allowed to have ships to leave the planet. So the citizens all got together, essentially stole the ships and took a joyride over to Rechese. Yeah. And then when they get to Rechese,
we're talking millions of people.
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't just like 5 dudes in a car. This is a lot.
Yeah.
But when they get to Rechese, they're shocked to find that machines are controlling the entirety of that society.
Yeah.
Specifically, machines are manipulating human emotions and intellect. And this is what truly like ignited the jihad.
Yeah. They knew they were going to find some shit, but not to that level.
Yeah. It's everyone's just plugged in and no one thinks for themselves at all.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Yeah. And we can thank Fatir's genius for that, for this organizational brilliant coup.
We love a good bureaucrat.
They have their place.
Just kidding.
They have their place.
Fucking hate bureaucrats. We love a good person in logistics.
Yeah.
We'll say that.
That's a good way of saying
it. That's a better.
Everyone likes to be organized and have a good game plan. And that's what he's providing.
Yep.
So when they found that so many aspects of the Rechese society was being controlled by these machines, they set forth to eradicate that, and eradicate the machines, but also free themselves from that. So there's kind of a two-pronged approach, or a two-pronged reasoning, I guess. But still, it was pretty localized to just their system right now. It hadn't spread across the galaxy yet.
Yeah, it's this one vassal planet, and then Rechese, which is, if you want to stick to feudal terminology, a lording planet.
Yeah. Yep. When they freed the planet Rechese from the thinking machines, which I'm sure involved a lot of destruction and a fair amount of death, that really just fueled their expansion of this ideology. So people got behind them. They gained in their ranks, And they said, okay, well, let's keep this thing going.
Yeah. Just keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, right. But it's interesting to note that it wasn't Jehanne that was the principal driver of this.
No. So
she wanted justice for her child, and she wanted to free her people. And that was the spark that ignited this.
But she was a huge advocate for restraint as well.
Yes.
Whereas you had the priestesses, the main priestess, I guess, is what we'll call her. Mm-hmm. Her name is, and this is another one that I have my own pronunciation in my head. I don't know if it's right. In my head, it was, I read it as Urania.
I said Urania.
Urania. Okay.
Yeah.
So Urania, who was this chief priestess during the, we'll call it liberation of Rachesi, found this scientist named Dr. G. Demlin.
Yep.
And Demlin was this super like asshole-ish, arrogant kind of guy.
If I could, I would love to read the actual passage
go
from the encyclopedia on this, because it really paints a picture of him.
It drives home who he is. Yeah, go for it.
Demlin was an especially arrogant and unrepentant man whose disdain for his fellow man's intelligence was equaled only by his respect for his own and that of his machines. Yeah, he's a very hardcore machine leaning person.
Urania is interrogating Demlin, so it's not like they're just having like a little chat or whatever. But during this interrogation, she basically tells him that, like, look, your work is violating the fundamental principles of respect for human life. Mm-hmm. And she's looking at this through the lens of, you're also insulting my goddess.
Yeah.
And Demlin's response to all of this is that, no, humans are just fucking stupid, and I can just make machines that think better for them anyways.
Yeah. There's throughout this whole lesson, I'm going to be jumping in with quotes from the encyclopedia.
Yeah, go for it.
Because there's a lot of good ones, like in these passages here. So the words that Demlin was reported to say here, or he said that there is more reverence in one of my machines than there is in, and this is the quoted part, a supposed goddess invented by a clutch of bucolic bumpkins on a pigsty of a planet. Now, I love a good alliteration.
Yep.
So bucolic bumpkins is a very fun thing to say. I'm going to have to add that to my repertoire. But that's a scathing thing.
Yep.
And as soon as he says this, he turns towards the icon of Kubebe that's in the room with them, and attempts to spit on it. And Urania is having none of this.
Yeah. And that's when she kills him.
Just the encyclopedia kind of glosses over it. It just says killed him with her ceremonial knife. So we don't know exactly how. I'm going to say to the throat.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So going back to Jehanne and her advocation for mercy and restraint, the flip side to that coin is Urania now wanting blood for all of this.
Yeah. So after this whole ordeal with Demlin, Urania goes back and she starts really adding fuel to the fire for this thing to take off. And Jehanne is like, you got to pump the brakes. We did what we needed to do here.
Yeah.
But it just, she doesn't win that fight.
As we've seen later on in the timeline, religious zeal wins out.
Yep.
On this one.
Whew, good thing that could never happen in real life, John.
No, never. Why would it ever happen in real life, Zach? But yeah, Jehanne's arguments were basically that the Crusaders would only grow more ruthless as time goes on, and that she was worried about the deaths of innocents in this case. The priestesses resolved on jihad in spite of Jehanne's predictions, and ultimately the discoveries on Rachesi and the certainty that it was happening elsewhere was their justification for continuing.
Yeah.
A quote from the encyclopedia here, I think that really stuck out to me was the people of Komos believed in their religion. So too did Jehanne, but her beliefs were tempered with mercy and foresight to a degree not true of the priestesses.
Yeah. That's a very good just synopsis of those feelings that we're working, or the divide that we're seeing.
It's important to note, though, that Urania and the priestesses didn't rip leadership of the jihad away from Jehanne, though. They still left her in place, and it wasn't, we talked about Komos being a very matriarchal society. It wasn't out of place for her as a woman to be in charge of all of this.
Right.
I think the encyclopedia makes mention, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like, instead of asking why was a woman, leading this jihad, it was like, what were her leadership accolades, or like...
Well, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I think it says a question was not, why was a woman at the head of this? But it was, why was this woman at the head of this? So it was like an implicit understanding that a woman would be the leader of this. But the question came down to, why was Jehanne the leader or the face of the jihad?
Yeah.
Which we'll get into later. I guess we're getting into it now.
Yeah. Look at that. Segues.
So there's growing tension. I mean, there's two, quote unquote leaders of this jihad. We have Urania and Jehanne, with very different ideologies and very different ideas on the scope of this movement. And it kind of all comes to a head after, a couple of years later. Like we have some years of, I'm going to say, progress within the movement, whether that's good progress or bad progress, whatever. But the movement is progressing.
Yeah. Well, in 199 BG on Ilerda, Jehanne and her, followers in this jihad demonstrated tactical genius by effectively bringing the planet to its knees with minimal casualties whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's where her, tactfulness and her planning and everything really, shone brightest. Yeah. In all of this.
So if you want to look at, Urania's dealing with the scientist Demlin, as her flavor of jihad, you can look at the activity on Ilerda as Jehanne's flavor of jihad.
Jihad through diplomacy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the encyclopedia goes through really, great lengths to explain this and to draw light to this fact that Jehanne knew that they had a powerful force behind them.
Yeah.
But her idea of using power was not an immediate strike and destruction and violence. It was more of a coercion into getting whoever they were showing their strength against to get to do what they wanted them to do, but without any kind of violence.
Yeah.
And it seems like Urania was just like a shoot first, ask questions later kind of person.
Carpet bomb first, ask questions later.
Sure. So we have two, like we've been saying, we have two people kind of leading this, and they're going to have to come to terms with this eventually.
And two people are definitely going to lead this for a long time, and it's going to be totally fine.
Sharing power is something that people can do.
Yep.
So under Jehanne's leadership, there are a number of capitulations when they start to go to other planets, with minimal violence. Not to say that there isn't violence. One that is highlighted is a planet called Thapsus.
Yep.
And this happens in 196 BG,
where we see more violence inherent in the system.
Yep. And similarly, another attack on a planet called Parlon in 191 BG. Where the combined cases of casualties there are less than 10,000.
Which, for a planet-wide jihad...
Yeah. Multiple planets.
Pretty all right.
Yeah. And again, this is coming from the historical record of the encyclopedia, so it does note that those actual numbers could be much less.
Yeah.
But under the leadership of Jehanne, it is largely a bloodless coup that's going on. But that changes.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. that changes when the Jihad spreads to a planet called Carthagos. Carthagos? Is that
I don't know.
hard T?
So, all right. So I took Latin as a kid in middle school and high school. There's Carthage, which is obviously
That's where my
the
mind
namesake. But I always read it from the Latin perspective, where like there was no TH sound. It was just Carthago delenda est.
Okay.
Carthage is destroyed. That's just in my head. Carthagos, I'm sure, is probably fine.
Okay.
It is probably the way that it's pronounced. I'm just being a reductive asshole.
I appreciate the perspective, honestly.
Yeah, I just have that fucking shit like ingrained in my like brain still. So,
well, do you want to tell us about Carthagos?
that's where Jehanne dies.
Well, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
cat's out of the bag.
Yep. Spoilers.
So they were doing their same thing where they show their forces, the large number of people that are behind them, the ships and ships and ships. They're putting pressure on the planet to surrender. They're not inciting a lot of violence or anything like that. And Jehanne is at the proverbial wheel of this, and she's on a ship called the Sarah 3, which I thought was a nice little addition.
So, point of note here, Sarah was the intended name of their daughter, who was forcefully aborted.
Right. Yeah, we should have said that earlier. My bad. Sarah was the daughter's name.
Needless to say, we have a lot of notes for this, so we might have missed a thing or two throughout all of this. Apologies.
It's okay. So the Sarah 3 and was leading the charge against this Carthagos planet, and again, pressuring them into surrendering, trying to do it in the most nonviolent way. But tragedy struck, and there was an undetected mine in space around the planet, and Jehanne and her ship were destroyed.
Jehanne,
excuse me. I'm just like straying further and further away from the pronunciation.
That's fine.
I'm getting closer back to Janine, honestly.
Yeah. So Jehanne dies in
182.
Yeah, 182 BG. All of this, really, I don't know if this is the right word, but martyrizes her, turns her into a martyr for the cause, which makes people kind of go off the deep end in terms of just like really igniting fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
But there is still some norms that are trying to be kept throughout all of this. For instance, like Fatir is still running logistics. He's still, making sure that things are running efficiently, but you're going to start, while her death binds people together in this cause, you see some groups really just go off way into more of just like complete destruction and chaos rather than just focused destruction on thinking machines and everything.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, killing and stuff like that. So in the time between 182 and when we talked about in our last summer school on Holtzman, on his fifth return in 108, you just have essentially just raising of planets, just complete destruction, leaves people in utter like poverty and famine and all these things that you see with just full on war, and everything. But ultimately, the Jihad did what it set out to do and destroy thinking machines across the galaxy. Yeah. And as we talked about,
well, before we wrap that up, on what you just said, it's important to note, like, this goes on for almost a century, 182 to 108 kind of thing, almost a century of this. And it devolves into what's more analogous to like pirate raids towards the end. Still with the through line and cohesive thread of Jehanne as the martyr for this cause, But it's not like we see in the movies with Paul's Jihad, where it is an Imperial army. He has the Fremen, and it's a single force that is going out and about and causing, fucking shit up.
Yeah.
It is basically little militias that are around.
Pockets of mercenaries is what I think how the encyclopedia describes it.
Yeah, it did. And yeah, they're mostly the people who were doing this were mercenaries from the previous planet that was conquered. So it's a very different form of this social change and social destruction that we know from the current timeline in movies, but it is still every bit as destructive.
Yep. And as we talked about last episode, it culminates with the viewing of the final destruction of thinking machines.
Yeah.
Ibrahim von Holtzmann himself.
Yep. So all the way to 108, Holtzmann is the last of the thinking machines that gets knocked out.
We never got his final.
We'll never know. We will never know.
Fuck. My boy.
Yeah. So that's, that in a nutshell, that, or a little bit larger of a nutshell, is the Butlerian Jihad and kind of how it started and how it ended. So you want to talk a little bit about just some effects and it's a little more heady stuff, I guess, with the jihad. And when we're going into this section, we're going to talk about a parentheses fictional historian that's mentioned in the Dune Encyclopedia.
Yep. I have no idea. Good luck.
Yep. Oh man. Okay. So I'm going to spell this one first. So the first name is Kruwl.
Cruel.
There's only one way I can say that is Cruel.
Yep.
And I have about 15 different ways to say his last name. It is spelled Sheivvun.
How did you pronounce it in your head?
My first pronunciation was Shevun.
I did Shaivun.
Okay, cool.
So,
we were close. But it could be Shiavun if you want to put an emphasis on the I.
Yeah.
Shevun just sounds better, or it's easier for me to say.
Cruel Shaivun just sounds.
Cruel Shaivun. Okay,
Cruel
I like
Shaivun.
Yeah. Anywho. Is a imperial historian who lived from 113 to 185, and this would presumably be AG.
Yeah. Because that's how time works when you're looking at dates.
Yep, that's true. That's true. And his major work, The Founding of the Empire, Shevun speculates on the jihad, employing a metaphor of waves affected by the tides.
Yeah. And
as I was reading the encyclopedia, this entry in the encyclopedia, I love this. I truly, truly loved this metaphor that was painted here. And I would just love to just read it as a whole.
Yeah. There's no better way to.
So again, this is from his work, The Founding of the Empire. He says, at flow, each wave breaks and recedes, but the series of waves creeps higher and higher on the beach until high tide is reached. Should someone wish to divert the waves of high tide for human purposes, the task would be impossible during the ebb or low tide. Likewise, in human affairs, a popular readiness for change is aimless without the capable leadership, but the great leader without ready support ends in obscurity. However, when human genius combines with the movement of the tides in the people, new direction results. Such a combination was the Butlerian Jihad. I love that. That's a really, really poetic way of putting it.
I think it's really cool too to just be like, yeah, leaders are forgotten if they're not
followed,
supported by their people. Yeah.
Supported is a much better word for that. Yeah, no, I think of our current political landscape, and I thought of our current political landscape a lot with this. Just
dread.
Peek behind the pod curtain, where it's currently January 26th as we record this. A lot of stuff's happened in the U.S. over the past couple of weeks. Whether you think it's good or bad, it's a lot of weird shit's happened. So we're kind of in a tumultuous space right now. So this metaphor of the waves and the tides really stuck out to me.
I'm not going to say anything.
That's all that needed to be said.
Yep.
If you don't know where John and I land on the political spectrum by now, listen harder.
Yeah. Go back to the start of this episode. You'll understand. I think Cruel Shaibun also makes note that the term Butlerian Jihad suggests individuals like Jehanne Butler shape the events, whereas, terms like the Great Revolt, which is an alternative name for the Butlerian Jihad. In the encyclopedia, this isn't some HBO whitewashing the word jihad bullshit. Implies that societal currents led to the emergence of this.
Well, that's like the great man of history theory. Do the times make the man, or do the man make the times? And I'm using man in a general sense here. And I think there's something to be said for both sides of that.
I prefer the real men of genius theory presented by Bud Light.
Bud Light?
Yeah.
All right. We salute you.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I'm glad you brought that up.
What, that HBO whitewashed the word jihad?
We have already brought that up in the past.
Yeah, but I just want to bring it up again just to remind people that HBO, y'all are a bunch of fucking cowards.
Cowards. Depending on your framing and depending on how you look at this, it's either called the Butlerian Jihad or the Great Revolt. Personally, I'm calling it the Butlerian Jihad, as we have for this entire episode, because I think Jehanne Butler deserves even though it really got away from her. The idea was very, very much mutated from her original idea. The sentiment was hers. The scale was not, but the sentiment was.
Yeah. The sentiment was ultimately seeking revenge for the forced abortion of her daughter, of her healthy daughter.
I was going to say who she knew was healthy.
Yeah. At the hands of Thinking Machine.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of her knowing that it was a healthy daughter, before we get too far away from Jehanne Butler and everything, I want to talk about some comparisons between her and Jessica.
Yeah. I think there's a good case for that.
Yeah. Most importantly, they're both women of the Bene Gesserit. Both Jehanne and Jessica, who, I don't know if you noticed this, but in the encyclopedia, anytime there's mention of Jessica, it's Jessica Paul Muad'Dib's mother.
Yeah. Don't love that, but
I just think it's funny.
Jessica, a whole human in her own right.
Yeah. They both, in their own ways, defy Bene Gesserit orders and standing.
Yeah.
Jessica does so in ensuring that her first child with Leto is a son rather than the daughter that she's told to bear. Jehanne leads this rebellion and acts from the forefront, whereas Bene Gesserit, teachings and everything prohibit public involvement and leadership.
Yeah.
So they both sought out their personal intentions more so than the intentions of their order.
Yeah. So
for their own reasons.
Yeah, different reasons for sure. But so what could arguably be the two greatest shifts in humanity? Because we'll talk about lasting effects of the jihad, Butlerian Jihad here in a second. Were started by Bene Gesserit.
By defying Bene Gesserit rules and order.
Bene Gesserit. So what does that say about Bene Gesserit rules?
They prefer stagnation.
They do. I think so. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments
on Blue Sky.
Yes. I think that would be a great discussion. I would love to hear what people think about that.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a little bit. We're kind of coming towards the end here. What are some of the big lasting effects other than obviously we have no thinking machines now, but I would say that is probably one of the smaller consequences of the Butlerian Jihad. If you put it into perspective.
Sure. Well, prior to the jihad, migration and movement around the system was handled by thinking machines.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the system, the galaxy as a whole. If we can't move through space, that's not good. So we need to find a way to move through space without these thinking machines.
Exactly. So I think it opened the doors to the universe of Dune as we know it in the movies and the original books to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say that the Butlerian Jihad is probably more important than Paul's, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like Paul's wouldn't have existed without this.
So Shaivun, in all of his writings, identifies 3 major pillars for the future empire.
Mm-hmm.
House Carino, who take their legacy from the Butlerians, or were actually butlers, who changed their name to Carino. The Spacing Guild, who filled the vacuum of needing to migrate and move people around the galaxy and around the universe. And our good old friends at CHOAM.
That's right.
Because the economy of everything is just fucked and destroyed. And there's, massive vacuums in wealth and power.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be great if we just consolidated all of that into one singular entity?
It would be. Let's talk about those 3 pillars just for briefly anyways.
Yeah. Because we're going to dive a lot more into 2 of those.
Yes, we absolutely will.
The third one we'll dive into in part 2 in season 2, but
yeah.
I
think the one that is probably the most relevant right now, anyways, without spoiling future episodes, is the the legislative side of that. You know? So before this, interstellar communication and travel was possible. We had thinking machines that were doing this.
Yep. Good old Holtzman taught us the ways.
Yep, he did. And when you think about, but there was no cohesive empire as we know it from the books. There was a bunch of different like coalitions and whatnot, political organizations before the jihad. It took a lot of forms.
Yeah.
So like you have one planet and it would form coalitions and relationships with other neighboring systems and whatnot. They form federations, confederations, unions, pastorates, hierarchies, feudocracies, neo-feudocracies, coalitions, commonwealths, colonial empires, autonomous dominions, etc., etc.
No watery bents distributing swords.
Well, none that are listed anyways.
No. Okay, fair.
So the encyclopedia says any form of association that is humanly possible. That's what.
So potentially watery bents distributing
potentially.
swords.
There's room in the interpretation for that. What this did was, okay, let me back up. Leadership and rule like this relies so heavily on communication.
Yes.
If you can't talk to each other, there's no way that you can lead someone.
No, because everyone's just isolated.
Yeah.
We're back to pre Holtzman times, effectively.
Exactly. Yeah. So without the ease of communication, which thinking machines took that place, there was no way for them to communicate. So all these coalitions and all those different systems or different ways of thinking that I just mentioned, those fall apart without this. A good example of this is a company called Transcom.
Okay.
And it was a trading corporation that had existed for about 7,000 years before the Jihad. So it's been around. Transcom, the 12 some odd thousand ships that operated within the Transcom network were all controlled by a central computer, very imaginatively named Syntrans. And it operated via Holtzman waves, and we had the mail drops things, all the stuff that we've talked about. So
I love the planet that Syntrans is on.
Oh, Xenophon.
Yeah. Such a cool fucking name.
Yeah, absolutely. When did Aliens come out? Was that early 80s? 81?
Alien was 79.
Okay.
Aliens.
Well, no, that's what I meant. The first one.
Oh, yeah. Because Alien was 79.
Because we get xenomorphs in the first
Yeah.
one. Okay. So
Yeah.
Xenophon, Xenomorph, love it. Continuity.
Yeah.
So Syntrans, this central computer, controlled all of that stuff for this company. And once the Jihad came around and got rid of that computer, the company just ceased to exist. There was no way for any kind of trade or commerce to exist without this.
Now I'm doubting myself. Yeah, Alien was 79. Sorry.
You're good.
I was like, I better get that fucking right before people come at me.
Would they be more upset for me not knowing or you getting it wrong?
Me getting it wrong.
Okay. Fair
Yeah. 100%.
So without Syntrans to really organize all of this trade and commerce and communication between different planets, it falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
And that is illustrating the need for a centralized method for travel and communications and all this kind of stuff, which is where the Spacing Guild, which we'll talk about next episode, to fill that void.
Yeah.
So we talked about politics, the political thing. It needs communication. Without thinking machines, we do not have any kind of space travel. What was that third pillar?
The economy.
The economy. Through the consolidation of power that the Krinos went through after the Jihad, there needed to be a main economic body, which is what CHOAM fits the shoe of. And again, we will talk about that later. So this, I've said it before, I'll say it again, Butlerian Jihad set the stage and gave us the opportunity to exist in the world of Dune as we know it.
Yep. It also left open the need for alternative computing.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that now as mentats.
Yeah.
So thank you to Jehanne Butler for giving us wicked, crazy eyebrows and pink stained lips.
Yeah, it's fun. This is a little personal story. I was trimming the beard this morning, and I got a good look at my eyebrows. And as you get older, as a man gets older,
did you feel a little bit more thoofier than normal?
From Lynch's movie? Yeah.
Oh.
I saw a couple hairs that were getting real crazy long. I was like, let me snip those off real quick.
Take care of that real quick. Okay.
And they had the white tips on the end of them, so they were going a little bit gray. So that's fun. Fun stuff. You love to get older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my beard is starting to gray, and I'm just like, no.
Yeah, man. Embrace it. It's going to look good on us.
Maybe. Who knows?
So, yes, mentats. The guild navigators, all the things that we had to replace with computers came also from the Jihad.
Yep. They begin finding their way very quickly after.
Mm-hmm.
And as you've already said, we will be talking about the guild next episode, and I'm very excited to talk about the guild. Before we wind down too much, though, one thing I do want to bring up,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the book describes it almost exactly this way if I got my notes correctly. Surely one of the great ironies of history lies in the fact that the planet which conceived the anti-machine jihad also birthed the supreme technology of Ix. So, Komos was renamed over the course of,
millennia.
Not even millennia, but just like after the jihad and everything became the planet Ix. Which, as we know from reading the books, the Ixians love their machines.
That is some irony right there for sure. Oh man, I must have missed that. That's a good point.
Yeah. The encyclopedia also brings up some debate as to whether the cost of the jihad was ultimately worth it. And it, just due to the widespread suffering and the psychological scars of, thinking machines and everything like that, and unresolved gains from the jihad, whether or not they justified the losses.
Well, what do you think?
So, I don't know if you've heard about this thing called AI, Zach. It keeps getting shoved down our throats everywhere we look. I think
the new Apple tool, right?
I think Jehanne Butler was right.
Yeah. No, I agree.
No, that's what I think. Ironically, as I spent this past weekend building a new computer, but
it's different.
It's not a thinking machine.
You still have to tell that one what to do.
Yes.
No, if you're thinking like, okay, let's do a cost benefit analysis here. A very quick napkin math cost benefit analysis. Yes, the jihad led to very, very widespread destruction and death, and death of innocence against Jehanne's initial desires for this movement. That is categorically not great. Not good. I would even say bad.
Yeah. How brave of you.
Thank you. Sorry, I dropped this. It's my crown. However, if you look at the ways that it allowed humanity to advance afterwards, that would have never happened had the jihad not taken place. Or extremely unlikely to happen. I don't know of a way to do it, or what a way that they would have done it, or a need for that to happen if computers had kept the pace. In all likelihood, the universe would have taken a turn towards what the Richesi were doing, which is just complete governance by AI.
Being flesh bodies controlled by computers.
Yeah. So, yes, on the whole, it was a very good thing. Mm-hmm. It sucks that it had to go through so much pain and suffering and destruction to get there, but sometimes that has to happen.
Yeah.
So, yes, not great, but I think the world and the universe of Dune up until Paul's jihad was better for it. Then we kind of take another turn.
Paul's jihad, the God Emperor.
Yeah, sorry, I should say Leto's jihad, not necessarily Paul's jihad. No, Paul's jihad.
Paul's jihad.
Paul's jihad. Yeah. So
Paul's jihad, Leto's tyranny.
Yes, that's what I'm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's what you meant.
So yeah, up until that point, yes, great, awesome, good. Then we take a little left turn back into the bad part, but
yeah. I gonna change subjects a little here real quick. I much prefer this telling of the Butlerian Jihad to Brian's telling of the Butlerian Jihad. Brian's telling of the Butlerian Jihad is very man versus machine.
Yeah.
Whereas this is much more man versus
self, pretty much.
Kind of. Yeah.
It's man versus man.
Yeah. I mean, Brian's jihad is literally human robot wars.
Yes.
Very Terminator inspired.
Yeah. It is not as thought provoking of a story.
No, it's definitely more
because this whole conversation, I mean, looking at the recording clock, we're an hour 15 into the recording right now. I think if we had only covered Brian's, it would have been about a 25-minute conversation. Because what kind of conversation and debate can come from, yes, machines are trying to kill us, we should kill them back. Not a whole lot. I mean,
evil machine bad.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not as rich. It's not as thought provoking. It's not as deep of a story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree.
I know there will be people that will disagree, probably.
And this is, I'll cover us a little bit. This is no indictment on how good or bad the books are. The story itself is, I think, richer from the encyclopedia.
The encyclopedia kind of leaves you with a lot to think about.
Yeah. Yep. I think it does. All right, man. Well, anything else to say on the Butlerian Jihad?
Not so much. I think we talked about everything we wanted to talk about today. And looking forward to talking about the guild. Yeah. So our next episode will be about the Spacing Guild. Its formation, its hierarchy, its organizational structure. We're going to get into that a little bit. Yep. We're going to get into the people who founded it and all the mishaps that happened up until the... No, it was perfect. There were never any... Yep. Nothing ever went wrong. Nope. Only a lot of stuff went wrong. So we're taking this from the end of the Jihad to the timeline switch over from BG to AG. Yep. So exciting stuff coming up. I would love to start some discussions. We're primarily on Blue Sky at this point. Almost exclusively. I think we decided that we're done with Instagram because things. Yeah. I don't care to support that platform anymore. I think we're going to be kind of holing up in Blue Sky, which has been a great community of fellow Dune nerds. So find us there. We love all of you. Yeah. Yeah. And, even though I'm not super active, I do read a lot of it. Yeah. Well, I don't love the fucking crypto bros that use AI art for Dune on Blue Sky. That's a thing. That's a whole fucking thing. And it's so goddamn. Is that really? Oh, dude. I have not seen any of this. Yeah. No, occasionally I look at the Dune hashtag often on the Dune Minute account. And occasionally I'll see some fucking crypto bro bullshit on Blue Sky, and I'm just like, absolutely the fuck not. Clearly they've never read the story. They would not. No, they absolutely haven't. That is blasphemous, using AI to create Dune art. Yeah. It's so bad too. Charlie's got 8 fingers. No, it's not that. It's just send me some examples. No. Okay. Or don't. That's fine. No. If you use generative AI for art, you're a piece of shit. Pay artists. Solid agree. Hard agree on that. Yeah. Anyways, back to what I was saying. We'd love to start a discussion, whether it's your thoughts on generative AI or your thoughts on the Butlerian Jihad, and was it right? Jehanne Butler did nothing wrong. Or if you just want to yell at us for the many different ways that we said different people's names throughout all of this. I would love to know a counter. If someone kept count during this episode, I would love to know how many different ways we said the names and how wrong they are if you know the correct pronunciation. Oh, I'm so sorry if we fucked that up. I apologize for nothing. As always, we're online in a couple different places. We are most active on Blue Sky, as we've just been talking about here, at duneminute.com. You can also email duneminute@gmail.com if you'd like to just get in touch with us directly. We keep an eye on that inbox every day, so, we're not missing anything that comes in there. And we'll be back middle of the month. I think we're still targeting the 15th for the next episode. Got a lot to talk about with the guild.
Oh, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we will see y'all later. Class is officially dismissed.
See ya.